Everyone is talking about magnesium. It's all you hear about. But why? What do we know about magnesium? Well, magnesium is the number one mineral that 75% of Americans are deficient in. If you are a woman over 35, magnesium will help you rediscover balance, energy, and vitality. Magnesium supports more than 300 enzymatic reactions in your body, including those involved in hormonal balance. From functional medicine doctors to mental well-being and female hormone experts, we all know that magnesium is the one mineral to improve all aspects of well-being and health. But which one? Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers, the trusted choice recommended by leading experts with 7 best-absorbed forms of magnesium to ensure your body receives the support it needs for overall well-being. Go to bioptimizers.com/balance today and use code BALANCE10 for 10% off. Support your journey to wellness at bioptimizers.com/balance. Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers, your foundation to optimal health and vitality.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, May 30th, 2024, as we bring you this new episode. We spoke about the idea a couple of weeks ago when the White Sox went 11-9 in a 20-game stretch, if that was going to be the high point of the season, especially after a 3-22 start. It seemed like the White Sox were playing competent baseball, and in a weird way, it was fun to watch. Since that stretch, during the Hell's Gauntlet, which we called this part of the 2024 schedule before opening day, the White Sox are 1-12. They went 0-7 in their homestand against Baltimore and Toronto. That's never happened in the 123-year history of the Chicago White Sox. Our previous episode, Jim and I talked about the fallout from Grifol's comments about calling the team flat after a loss to Baltimore. The White Sox players responded by getting swept by Toronto and outscored 15-4. Things are not getting better, and the only big roster move by the White Sox was sending Bryan Ramos down to AAA. We'll wait to see what the corresponding move is prior to the weekend series against the Milwaukee Brewers. The Chicago White Sox are currently on pace to finish 43-119 in 2024. How much longer can Chris Getz and Jerry Reinsdorf tolerate what's happening before substantial changes are made, including the dismissal of manager Pedro Grifol? Well, joining me to discuss are Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. But we have even bigger news. Happy belated birthday, James. How was your big day?
That was day one of what seems to at least be a 3-day cold. So very momentous to spend. Day one was in the sore throat phase. Day 2 and day 3 have both been in the nose as a faucet stage. So the birthday day really was the most special of the days and the most enjoyable. But
sorry, man, that's awful.
I did see a Sky game. It's very funny that the player nicknamed Barbie is basically Joakim Noah in terms of play style. It's a weird alternate future to watch play out. But they don't have any scoring, so it really was not a big day off from watching the team I do for work.
Well, speaking of work, the White Sox again swept by the Blue Jays, 1-12 in their last 13 games. And looking at the American League Central standings, the Guardians are 37-19. And they're now 3 games ahead against the Kansas City Royals as they tumbled with the Minnesota Twins this past week. The Twins are 31-25. They're 6 games back. Those 3 teams would be in the postseason if the season were to end today. And the White Sox are now 22 and a half games back at Cleveland at game 57 of the 2024 season. So, James, I imagine the vibes are not good, but I do have to ask, because that was the part of the podcast of the insight that we were missing when Jim and I were talking about the audio that you got for us from the clubhouse about Pedro Grifol's comments, and then what Corey Lee had to say, that Garrett Crochet and Danny Mendick What is the vibe like within the White Sox clubhouse right now after another rough stretch?
It's muted. It's frustrated. It reminds me of early this season. It's funny because you say like you wish you had me on, and I guess there's like little details I could offer, but like I felt like that was a situation you were as well positioned to break apart as anybody because everybody pushed back on what Grifol said like on the record. Like usually there's some sort of like when the You're Mean thing happened with Tony. There was like players that I had to reach out to privately, be like, "Hey, is this being reacted to internally the way it is externally?" And being like, "Yeah, it's that bad, or it's worse." And whereas like this was very like all the players knew it was coming. They also knew it was coming like the next day, and like people like Nicky Lopez and Gavin Sheets. It's not like they like waved us over or anything, but like they both knew that they were like of a tenure of player and like having started that game that they were kind of expected to talk in like both diplomatically, but making a clear point that they disagreed. Like there was like a very measured response by the players in the media of like, we are politely disagreeing, or at least saying politely, like, why are you coming after us about like a Kyle Bradish start? Like Wednesday, when like Alec Manoah, who we don't know if he's a major league starter again yet either, and leaves for an injury, and they get like blanked by basically the long reliever. Like that was kind of the effort to be like, hey, maybe why didn't we make it just why didn't we figure out how to get something going here? Like they didn't feel like the Kyle Bradish Garrett Crochet like pitchers duel was the cause, their jumping off point to kind of frame a season long issue as kind of like effort or focus. And so it just seemed like weird timing. I wonder if some of it was like frustration of the outstanding Fetty Crochet pitching performances are kind of their opportunities to win. They're kind of opportunities to look like a real team and be competitive in the way that is designed to want, that they play a slow scoring, defensive game. So to not win it and to not really seemingly have much of a chance of winning it seemed like it was the impetus to blowing up than rather like a really objective assessment of like whether the offense is hitting its potential. Like it's really hard to look at their lineup and not see like this doesn't even look anything like they hoped it would look like. I mean, slapping one roll of Luis Robert tape over the start of it makes it look a lot more like at least what our vision of the offense would be. But just like watching, like, man, really thought the Corey Julks leadoff man situation would get off, would generate more activity when we were discussing in spring training. Like it's very like slapping things on out of emergency all the time. So yeah, it's a really bad offense. Yeah, you could call it out kind of every game, but it seemed like a timing and it wasn't built up to in a way that the team thought it made sense.
Well, to follow up on that, is Pedro Grifol ready to make some changes? Like, are there impending changes coming? Because a big part of the reason why the White Sox offense, yes, injuries. They don't have Eloy Jimenez. They don't have Luis Robert. Maybe Robert joins the team sooner than later. They're waiting on Yohan Moncada to come back after the All-Star break. Those are three bats that they were counting on at the beginning part of the season to help generate some offense. But here we go again. The Andrews, Andrew Vaughn and Andrew Benintendi. I mean, Andrew Benintendi, Jim, is going to seriously challenge Adam Dunn. Like, man, we'll get into this because I think Ozzie did it to make Kenny Williams mad by playing Adam Dunn every day. I don't get that sense from Pedro Grifol, but I feel like Pedro is going to continue playing Andrew Benintendi the rate that he has, despite how much he's getting paid, because he's got something to prove, because he wants Benintendi to show that he's truly a pillar of the Chicago White Sox offense. And by pillar, for those that live in Bridgeport, you can just look at the viaducts, and that's what the pillar of Andrew Benintendi looks like right now, rusting through. So sorry for the mini rant there, James. So back to my question that I was gonna ask, like, any inclination that Pedro Grifol is going to make some sweeping changes to try to get something more out of this White Sox offense?
I thought you had said Jim for a second, so I thought, phew, oh, what a reprieve from having to explain this offense. No, that's certainly the indication. He kind of actively pushed back at it. Vinny Duber, my colleague, trying to gently suggest, like, hey, would you bench Benintendi or send Vaughn to the minors, especially now in the wake of Bryan Ramos being sent to the minors, which is something they always said that they're willing to do, of like, that it wouldn't necessarily be a long stay. And, Grifol signaled earlier that he didn't see like sending a prospect down would be like a big demerit. And Ramos was also someone they thought would like handle it well, so that they weren't afraid to like exposing him and then sending him down with more to work with. But it seems like he's kind of this generation of prospects that they actually view as long-term pieces that get this different treatment, where there's a lot more response to their struggles, but also it's a situation where like if you have options, or if you have like seemingly can get more out of the minors, there's a different standard for you than someone who's been established as a mainstay. But Andrew Vaughn has options. He just seems like he's of a different generation of prospects for them, where it's like there's not really more that they feel like they can mine out of him what they have. They're trying to get him back to normal because they expected kind of at least league average bats or above from these two guys. But it's almost like they're being treated on a different track, because like developing them to be very good players in 25 and 26 and 27, that's not really in the cards, where for Ramos it still is. So they want to be more responsive to his track, but I don't see how they can really, what's the breaking point where it's, viewed as a sunk cost, or you move them on to other options the way that you've been able to, shuffle through options in right field, or in other situations where it's a bit more malleable. And then of course that extends to Martin Maldonado. What's the breaking point for him offensively? Which seems like
nothing.
Possibly nothing, but it feels like there should be something. He did have some at least harder contact outs with the glasses this week, but it doesn't feel like it's this Tyler Flowers transformation situation just yet.
So with James reporting, Jim, that we're not expected to see sweeping changes from Pedro Grifol and this White Sox offense, I referred to your column Thursday night. So for podcast listeners, if you're listening to this and you didn't get a chance to read Jim's column that was posted on Thursday on Sox Machine, I highly recommend it. You did an excellent job, sir, using Pedro's words against him. And I just don't, if he's not going to make sweeping changes to try to start something for better play, especially from the offense, Jim, will anyone within the White Sox?
I guess the caveat with Grifol and taking him at his word when it comes to sweeping changes is he often talks about, or he often doesn't foreshadow change, or he doesn't issue like an ultimatum. It tends to be, I haven't even begun to think about making this change, and then 2 days later he makes it. And it's a tactic that I don't think reflects well on him, just because he makes himself all about the baseball and says like, I'm so consumed with every game that I can't begin to talk about what our record is or what the other teams in the league are doing, or he always shrugs off every attempt to contextualize a team in a larger setting because he's so focused on the game at hand and the roster at hand. And then when it comes to like offering a judgment on how somebody's doing, he's like, I can't do that. I've never even begun to thought of that. So like, what is he doing with the 21 hours of the day that the White Sox aren't playing, to where he doesn't consider these questions? And obviously he does, but he says he doesn't, and it just makes him look, ill-prepared for everything that comes up, and certainly the results bear that out. But I would say, like, it's possible Benintendi gets bumped down to like platooning from here on out or something like that, until he shows some uptick or something like that. And it looks like seat of the pants managing, because he offers really no possibility that it could happen. But take him at his word, especially since it involves a veteran versus a either a fringe player or a newly acquired player. And it's really difficult, because James mentioned the timing of the Bradish comments and saying they're flat, and usually if you're playing with a team that has this little talent, you try to time it a little bit to where like maybe they have Oakland coming up in the schedule. And they say like, well, I really fired up our team by saying they were flat because they faced Oakland after facing the Yankees and the Orioles. But that didn't happen. It's just, more of the same team and more of the same AL East teams they've been losing to. And so like he didn't leave himself an opportunity to look better the way like, which World Series was it where Chris Sale yelled in the dugout and then the Red Sox scored some runs and they're like, wow, Chris Sale really inspired this team. And most of the dugout was like, I don't know what he said, but it just happened to be like,
it's a 2018, I think.
And the Red Sox just happened to have a talented team that could score runs, in any given inning because they're in the World Series. But, Sale looked good because he happened to, show some emotion at a time and the Red Sox responded afterwards. And, Grifol, didn't pick the best opportunity to have that kind of bump where he could take credit for it. So now it's kind of like a, wah wah. And where do you go from here with your first foray? But you would think like if he was already going on this limb a little bit to piss off the clubhouse, you would think that would be like, well, now I'm bad cop. I was good cop for all this time. Now I'm, putting on the shades and, not caring about what anybody thinks because like if this roster is going, or if I'm going down, this roster is going down with it, or at least, I'm taking down some of the underperformers a notch just because like they're the ones who are making, they're reflecting poorly on me and making this a one and done in terms of my managerial future. So this seems like his opportunity to make more sweeping changes. And if he lets this pass by, if he makes his big criticism and nothing else happens, then it's just a matter of like, when is he going to be fired? When is Jerry going to feel like the product needs a shakeup? When is the public going to be just done with the White Sox to the point where the act of changing the manager offsets the nuisance of having a manager and a half on the ledger for a couple of years? Like, I think that's, the calculus the White Sox have to work out, but it would seem like it's here in terms of just what he's shown, the clubhouse more or less shrugging him off. And if, there's no huge shakeup to the chief underperformers, there wasn't last year, so it stands to reason there won't be this year, then there's really nowhere else to go. And then it's just a matter of like, okay, when do you switch to Charlie Montoyo? And, I heard... I saw in a few places people asking like, well, shouldn't they go to Sergio Santos then? Or like somebody more promising? Like, no, anybody more promising should be kept away from this roster and have nothing to do with what happens the rest of the way. This is all just keep the contamination to who's already on the coaching staff and go from there.
Yeah. I mean, like the reason I feel, not that I would necessarily see it coming, but like one of the reasons I don't get like worked up with the idea necessarily something's imminent is because the purpose of Grifol managing the season is to get them through this season. It's not like specific benchmarks of performance that are like really highly valued that they're not getting. I would argue that there is stuff that they're missing out on by, just players not being utilized or, put in positions to succeed or, playing on a, good defense or competitive baseball. But the reason why you wouldn't necessarily go to Sergio is because you don't want to slap Sergio as like a Band-Aid like you would want. Like if it was actually a managerial candidate you would want, it'd be someone you want to put in a good situation or set up to succeed. That's why I think like if it was an interim situation, it'd be something that's very obviously interim of just like get us through the season, because the whole purpose of just get us through this while we make trades, while we develop our prospects, while we do a bunch of things where we'd like, if there were good signs in major league, that we'd like some developmental stories. Like obviously Garrett Crochet is kind of a big little value add, but like really our goal is to get through this. Not we don't want to be like arguing about the batting order of this like team that's 27 games under 500. Like this is not something we want to devote resources toward.
Yeah, I think the biggest value of firing Grifol is more just the front office saying to the fans, like, this is not good. Just after all of, especially with the comments about Benintendi and Vaughn saying, like, I'm not going to let a couple months spur an overreaction. It's like, well, it's a couple months on Benintendi.
Season's only 6 months.
Yeah, it was a couple months after 6 months.
Not that many months.
Yeah. It's just like, in the context of one season, it's a lot. In the context of what Benintendi did last year and what Vaughn has, he struggled to, get his career off the ground. I think for, especially, given his draft status, like it's even longer than that. So like by any scale, it reflects really poorly on what the time Grifol thinks he has. And I hate this term sense of urgency because it usually just means like, oh, look like you're trying really hard, but don't really do anything. But in this case, it is like, if your job's on the line and a third of the season's gone and it's the worst third of the season the White Sox have ever had, you might want to like have a little bit of, just resourcefulness, a little bit of, try to MacGyver something, even if you have to upset some people in order just to show that you care and that's important to you and that, the status quo is unacceptable. So I think just, if Grifol isn't willing to do it, then, it's a matter of like, okay, let's reset the managerial chair, even if it's like Montoyo burning off the rest of the calendar, but just like resetting the reality to where everybody says like, yeah, this is really awful and we need to do things about it. We can't make the sweeping changes we need to make or like kind of change up the personnel till after the season, but we see what you're seeing. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah. Cause to your point, Jim, about the paying customers in the column and maybe outside of Brooks Boyer, everyone else within the White Sox organization is simply ignoring the paying customers. So, Brooks, if you are hearing this, you could skip this part. I feel like a broken record about this, but the whole point of this business, professional sports, is entertainment. Especially Major League Baseball, that point seems to get lost lately. You owe it to the fans by providing a product worth buying tickets and paying cable and streaming subscriptions for. We don't have the TV ratings yet, but I'm sure they are laughable for the White Sox. They are now averaging a little more than 15,000 fans per home game. The White Sox are currently on pace to only draw 1.215 million fans, which would be the lowest 162 game attendance since the current stadium was built in 1991. Whoever within the organization, like somebody needs to stand up and say, we have to start producing better results because this is going to be a business problem for us. And moving on from Pedro, because Pedro is hurting our bottom line because our fan base doesn't trust him, maybe that's something that creates a little bump, a little bit of interest, and maybe the players respond better to Charlie Montoyo. Like, you have to do something. You just can't continue down this path of this car crash of a season for the Chicago White Sox, because with the attendance drop, Jim, we know they're going to use that as an excuse. Well, we didn't draw that many at the gate, so that's why player payroll can't be $128 million next year. And we're now on our own on the TV contract side, so we can't even have $115 million payroll in 2025. Like, they're going to use these built-in excuses because it's probably true. So now, not only is this an on-the-field issue, this is going to be a business problem for the Chicago White Sox. And to your point, like sense of urgency, man, if the bottom line, the impact to your bottom line does not create urgency in your business, you need to get out of the business.
There was a Orioles writer, was like, he's been around some time, and he was just saying like, man, the vibe of the stadium is so sad. And I just had for a second, I was like, normally I dismiss like attendance complaints. I was like, man, he would know.
Yeah, not that long ago. Not that long ago. So from our perspective at Sox Machine, like I mentioned, the White Sox are on pace to finish 43 and 119. Gents, should we change our focus to how will this get better for the White Sox to let's see how big this dumpster fire could grow, Jim?
I think dumpster fire right now. Once Robert comes back, and assuming he's healthy and he'll be able to like last more than a week, which oftentimes doesn't happen when it comes to these rehab stints, especially with Robert's track record, Jimenez and Moncada that extends to as well. The product should be more respectable. You should have more moments, more highlights. The lack of resounding homers, I think, is something that's been noticeable. Not just homers, but just the cathartic swings that even if they don't swing a game, at least it's like, oh, that was fun. That was cool. Like there's been a lack of those kind of moments, which I think just makes it feel like a very, quadruple A product all around. Really, it's Crochet and Fetty providing the kind of upper echelon. Oh, these are major leaguers out there, and then it's a matter of like, do they get enough run support? And the answer has been largely no. So I think like Robert coming back, if he's able to resume where he was, that should help and kind of restore them back to like the high 50s kind of bad win team versus, challenging the Tigers and the Mets for worst modern day, non-Cleveland Spiders franchise. But for the time being, I'm kind of interested in seeing Grifol squirm if he's capable of doing that, or just he kind of goes on his autopilot of, just the four answers he has to things and just cycles through them. But it's, that's kind of the more compelling storyline until, actual major league talent comes back to the roster.
Because James, you've been crushing it, especially providing more insight in what the White Sox are trying to do to get better. Like prove that hope is coming, especially with your recent pieces about the Birmingham Barons. But when it comes to like Chicago, should we just report on, wow, this dumpster fire continues to grow and grow? Is anyone going to throw cat litter into the dumpster fire to put it out, or are they just going to add more gasoline?
Does that work?
I think cat litter, it does work at a gas station. So you have some either sand or cat litter. So if there's like a fuel leak, you can toss it onto the gasoline that's on the pavement before somebody sparks it up.
Our selling point for like Luis Robert coming back is whether does he throw
he is the
10-pound bag of cat litter on the I never lost sight of the goal, which was try to the team to avoid historical infamy. Obviously was feeling a little bit better about it 2 weeks ago. Now it's a dark period, but I want to say like the second half should be more interesting in terms of personnel. Like post trade deadline, there should at least be like a lit less just showcasing people, which is like interesting in the sense of like probably Corey Julks has been more watchable than your average White Sox player, but also like seeing him get hot, it doesn't necessarily think like, well, I don't think we're yet at the person of like, is this the guy who's going to last through the rebuild and become a mainstay? Like the way we were talking about like Nicky Delmonico's second half of 2017. I think a bit more seeing their pitching depth, like, they were reporting on from Birmingham, which I think there's not really a guy in the Birmingham rotation. And you should say like, there's no chance for them to make the majors this year, except for Schultz. So even if the pitching isn't necessarily better results wise, I think it gets more interesting in the second half though. Maybe that's a tall order since they're already interesting 2 out of 5 turns. Who knows if they can match that? I would say there's at least a nugget of an idea that you should see Colson in the final month, but that's kind of a long wait. I think Robert's like objectively one of the most entertaining, like tooled up players in the majors, and just seeing him on a nightly basis would probably be a bit more, entertaining than kind of average power guy trying to get the most out of his approach. Corner outfielders who run good routes in center field, like seeing someone who's actually has plus tools there, I think would raise the scene and give us something to more distract from just like pure misery and saying there's no point. I think it's a bit that while the long-term view of the franchise puts a damper on everything, the fact that like there's just not very watchable performances or very interesting right now is something I think could be amended by 1 or 2 guys kind of catching a fire or just coming back from injury or getting called up.
Well, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, but coming up next, we'll talk about the demotion of Bryan Ramos and preview the upcoming Milwaukee Brewers series and hype up our own tailgate that we're hosting on Saturday, next on the Sox Machine podcast. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. We'll be having our first road trip of the season, visiting Milwaukee and having our big tailgate with our friends from the 108 and the Chicago Sports Bums. Let's say you have a change of heart and mind, and at the last minute decide to join us in Milwaukee. Well, use Game Time to score yourself some tickets for the Saturday, June 1st game between the White Sox and Brewers. Join us. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. As I mentioned in the intro, the only player move right now the White Sox have recently made is that they demoted Bryan Ramos to AAA. There is going to be a corresponding move added to the 26-man roster sometime on Friday, so make sure that you're following us on social media at Sox Machine. Follow James at JR Fegan. Once James gets that information, he's always great about tweeting out who the White Sox add to the 26-man roster. For Bryan Ramos and his cup of coffee, which included a stint on the injured list, in 15 games he batted .196 with a .208 on base percentage and slugged .239. And there was some concern when the White Sox decided to promote Ramos from AA to Chicago because he was struggling to start 2024 in AA. And now with him going to Charlotte, James, what adjustments or growth points do the White Sox want to see from Bryan Ramos before they call him up again in Chicago? And hopefully that second call up lasts a little bit longer than 15 games.
I mean, on the one hand, he kind of, as much as bad as his numbers look after, not getting hit coming back from the IL, he kind of stayed up longer than they were planning. Like he was basically, Danny Mendick was supposed to tag team him back to the minors because of how well he handled things in his first week or so. And the first week he's getting a lot of the standard right-hander approach of like, let's sit him to chase away. And he was pretty good when they left something still out over the outer half, driving the ball up the middle, saying very nice things about, I was just trying to move the runner over after he hit like a rope to right center and like showed us kind of the tools that we were supposed to be excited about. It just, after that, Pedro Grifol noted that he started getting busted inside a lot. And that was something that's kind of supposed to be the little flaw in his swing path, that he can be a little bit vulnerable to inner half velocity because of his hand load. So while it's not supposed to be something that just wrecks his profile, God forbid, it was something that like once it started getting really targeted, he was probably going to struggle at for a bit and go into a mode of when he saw anything outer half, he was more vulnerable to chase out of the zone to the outer half once he's so conscious about getting busted inside that once he sees anything outer half at all, he starts getting a little bit more chase happy. So that seems to be what mostly happened to him. And then they, kind of came around the idea of like, well, we're not just like, our plan was never just to ride with them for 300 plate appearances, no matter how bad it got. And they're hoping a little bit like, all right, you've seen a little bit of what you need to work as far as like handling your half velocity and not kind of letting it wreck your plate approach. I don't know if AAA, where the fastball is noticeably down from the average fastball in the major leagues, will necessarily be, a direct translation, but maybe that's a good thing to get him a little bit more in the habit there when it seems a little bit more like an impossible task and get him in some sort of offensive groove. And also he'll be in Charlotte, so I'm just sure he'll put up goofy offensive numbers no matter what, because that's all that happens there.
Well, hopefully. I mean, we had Jim provide his in-person report when the Knights were in Nashville, and in a previous episode, folks, if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, I haven't checked after we record that episode, Jim. Is Colson Montgomery still slugging below 400?
He did hit a homer the other day, like the cheapest possible Charlotte homer that cleared the first row seats, like over the 315 sign.
Okay.
392. So it's still under 400, but he did hit his seventh homer.
I mean, you just do that homer Sheets hit yesterday. Like, yep. Come on, do that in Chicago. You'll be fine, kid.
Yeah. Jim, any concern from you that Ramos didn't hit the ground running in his first cup of coffee?
No, not really. Just given the expectations, like James said, like, oh, it's just a placeholder. We are out of infielders. We don't want to call Braden Shoemake back. Let's just ride Ramos. We feel like he can handle it well enough. And I thought actually Grifol, here's a case where he actually did handle it well. Like he said that, when he's up, he's going to play, and he largely played. Like when he was healthy enough, like maybe, skipped a game here or there, but otherwise he was in the lineup. He got a good run. He didn't let like one offer put him on the bench for a few days. He didn't get the Jose Rodriguez treatment of like almost like hazing, like you're on the roster, but you'll never get an at bat. It was pretty transparent, and got a chance to succeed, got a chance to fail, did both. And then like coming back from the injury just seemed like that maybe allowed opponents to build up a little bit more of a book on him. By the time he came back, didn't have his timing and a tougher assignment, and just started to kind of snowball on him a little bit. Like there were also some right on right changeups that were thrown that he missed badly on, to where like maybe it's just something he hasn't seen much in Double-A. Like maybe Drew Thorpe is the only one who throws it in Double-A, and they play on the same team. So everything's new for him, and I think he'll face that kind of more creative pitching or more established pitching that I guess differs from the conventional attack plans, because these AAA pitchers have had some success and know some strengths that might be against Ramos's weakness. So yeah, I think it's fine, and I think it was handled well. And if he does struggle in AAA, I don't think it's a matter of like the majors ruining him or anything. Like he did struggle to start the season in Birmingham. So the fact that he played well enough in Chicago for a little bit, I'm hoping that means that he's through whatever was, and there was kind of some vague health reasons why he was struggling. It just seemed to be like a normal slump. And I think Paul Janisch told James that he just needs to get in better habit of finding ways to end slump sooner, and seems like he was able to do that between the end of his time in Birmingham and Chicago. So yeah, ratchet down the degree of difficulty, and give him a friendly park, and hopefully like he looks no worse for the wear, or maybe even better for the experience.
Sounds like a great strategy for Andrew Vaughn.
Yeah, we're at that point now.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I tweeted that out, and it kind of created some conversation on social media. Like, the White Sox, I think, are right. They don't want Bryan Ramos to drown in his first cup of coffee in the majors, even though it's just 46 at-bats. You can send him down to AAA. He's got some things to work on. But they'll continue batting Andrew Vaughn cleanup. And he doesn't even have a 600 OPS. Like, there's just a disconnect for me. The logic doesn't match here. But we'll see how Bryan Ramos does. And again, you can follow on how all White Sox prospects do on Sox Machine with the minor keys that Jim writes daily, and of course the farm system fortnight that Jim also does every 2 weeks, in which he covers like 50 plus prospects, maybe guys you've never even heard of before. Jim will write about them. It's always very entertaining and informative as well. So we'll still keep tabs on Bryan Ramos and how he does with the Charlotte Knights. For the Chicago White Sox, moving into the Milwaukee series, James, any clues on who could be the 26th guy joining the roster? Have you heard any rumors at all?
Not really. I'd be surprised if it was Robert, though that would be the most like fun and relieving part, possibility.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not yet. There's always Braden Shoemake that could come back. And
yeah, he's not in the lineup tonight for Charlotte.
There you go.
That's exciting.
How exciting.
That's exciting. Would that be? Yeah, let's give well, this will be his third chance. He's been optioned once already, right?
He's got very little time in Atlanta. I don't know if I'd remark it as like, in fairness, as a realistic like opportunity to stick or even regular playing time.
No, I was just saying like this season.
He made the opening day roster because he like healed like Wolverine from his 4-week sprained ankle.
Right. And then did he get sent down earlier, or was this his first send down? That's what I'm getting at.
The first.
Oh.
Yeah, he survived a long time, like by somehow either staying healthy or not being the worst player at that given moment. Like there's always somebody taking the heat off him.
Well, second chance for Braden Shoemake. We'll see how he does with that opportunity. Because you're looking at still an infield of Andrew Vaughn, Nicky Lopez, Paul Dion, and I'm going to assume Danny Mendick, or they're going to platoon third with Shoemake.
And Bryan Ramos is 2 for 3 in his return for Charlotte, so everything is going according to plan.
There we go.
I think the season's a success. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the cat litter. Going into the dumpster fire now. Snuff out that fire. For the White Sox, unfortunately, they continue playing games this season. Now they head north to Milwaukee. And this is going to be an exciting weekend for us because this is one of our 2 fan meetups, our events this season for Sox Machine. We are co-hosting a tailgate along with our friends from the 108 and the Chicago Sports Bums. And that will be on Saturday, June 1st. So there is a pregame from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. at City Lights Brewing. That's at 2200 West Mount Vernon Avenue in Milwaukee, not that far away from AmFam Field. So a great opportunity before the parking lots open to grab a beer and meet up with other White Sox fans. From the 108 guys, Chirizi, Beefloaf, My Sox Summer, they'll be there hosting that. And then everybody will be in mass transit, the caravan, to the parking lots, aiming for the Yount parking lot. That's one of the general parking lots. That's where we will be set up with the Sox Machine tent and the Sox Machine flag now. Yes, we got a Sox Machine tailgate flag, so look for those after you park and find our tailgate. And no cost. So come hang out. Right now, we have 350 people who said that they will be stopping by the tailgate. Last time we did this in 2021, 150 people said they were coming and like 400 showed up. So I'm expecting a lot of Brewers security to swing by in their golf carts to break up large crowds. But it'll be a pretty big crowd for us at this tailgate. And the bums are also cooking up hot dogs and pulled pork sandwiches as well. So there'll be some food. We have Pilot Project Brewing out of Chicago and in Milwaukee. They're a very fun incubator for up-and-coming brewers in both Chicago and Milwaukee. They're donating beer to the tailgate and sponsoring the event as well. But feel free. It's a very Midwest thing when it comes to tailgates. Don't come empty-handed. So we'll have coolers. We'll have ice. So if you want to bring drinks, both alcoholic or non-alcoholic, if you want to bring food, can't wait for you to arrive in Milwaukee. It's not going to be 94. It's going to be like 70 degrees, so we're already ahead of the game this time.
Yeah, we won't be just standing in a parking lot getting cooked from above and below with the asphalt. So yeah, it's the other thing I remember from I keep calling it Miller Park, AmFam, whatever you call it, is I hadn't been there since the opening year, and I forgot like how much that place traps heat just because of the high walls, and like if there's not a whole lot of wind, like it just kind of cook in there. So in this case, like having the the 70 degree temperature, I think I will enjoy it more versus just feeling like I'm in a slow cooker, which is kind of how it felt last time.
It sure did. It's like, oh yeah, this place doesn't have HVAC. So, yeah, that was rough. Oh, that was a rough game. Carlos Rodon did not perform well. Yohan Mikata forgot to step on home plate. Remember that, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Good times. Good times. Your pitching probables for this series, I'm sure it's going to be a great time for the White Sox. Friday night, this is a 7:10 p.m. Central Time game. Eric Fetty will be making the start for the White Sox against Tobias Myers for the Milwaukee Brewers. Saturday's a really intriguing pitching matchup. You got 2 young lefties going at each other. Garrett Crochet for the White Sox against Robert Gasser for the Milwaukee Brewers, who's been electric at his first 2 starts. And Sunday at 1:10 p.m. Central Time, it's Nick Nastrini against Freddie Peralta. And the Milwaukee Brewers this year, new manager, Pat Murphy, replaces Craig Counsell, which Counsell took the bag and is now managing the Chicago Cubs. And boy, if this was a Cubs podcast, our tone might not be that much different, as the Chicago Cubs have now fallen below 500 as they lost that series up in Milwaukee. But here are the Brewers. Again, 10 games above 500. They're 33-23. They're first place in the National League Central. They're 5 games ahead. I don't know when the hell this happened, of the St. Louis Cardinals. Like, when do the Cardinals start playing baseball? I must have
The
missed
team
that.
meeting, the Sox series. They said enough is enough.
Turned them around. The Brewers are the only team in the National League Central with a positive run differential. They're plus 52. They've won their last 2 games. They're 6-4 in their last 10. But Jim, I ask you this question because you've always kind of admired the way the Milwaukee Brewers have handled their business. And I know that we bring up, like, man, the White Sox should build like Baltimore. They should build like Houston because those teams look like juggernauts in the making, especially the Astros because they've been to 7 straight American League Championship Series. But I wonder, to like your point, like the Brewers are having a successful start to 2024, and they look like they could win the National League Central. They're the favorites now to win the division. Is this model of success that the Brewers have closer to what the White Sox can actually attain?
Given their budgets and given, when they've succeeded, they've been able to add money, and when they haven't succeeded, they've had to cut payroll. Like, it's very similar to the ebbs and flows of the way the White Sox spend, or the way Jerry Reinsdorf spends. So when David Stearns was, not quite opting out of his contract, but making it known that his time in Milwaukee was winding down to a close. Didn't feel like the White Sox could get him, but I liked the idea of it, or at least thought like this is a way for the White Sox to evaluate, like, how do they do what they do and how can we do that here? And then it turns out Stearns goes to the Mets, and the Mets are a mess. So maybe, he's not an immediate savior. The other takeaway I have from, watching the Brewers and watching the Guardians this year is like, are managers overrated, or like even good managers? Do we know what good managers are? Because like Francona retires, they hand the job to Stephen Vogt, who's never done the job before, and the Guardians are as good as they've ever been. Milwaukee, they lose Craig Counsell. Everybody's up in arms. They're replacing the bench coach. They're pantsing the Cubs. And it just makes me wonder, like, when it comes to managers, like, I'm sure there's like, good managers and bad managers. We've seen that side, but like, it really, I think these two teams highlight the importance of just like the unified fronts between front office manager. Like, here are the guys we're going to give you. How are you going to use them? Or which guys can you use for this specific task or this specific position? How much do you want a platoon? How willing are you to go to the bullpen earlier than you want, or use an opener and go from there? Like, that's really seems like the way good managers become good is like having a front office that supplies them with talent they can use, and like probably a very open feedback channel between going in both directions of like, you need to play this guy more, and like, I can't play this guy more, and going from there. Because the Brewers, I mean, like, they're kind of doing it again. Like, part of it's guys they've developed, like Bryce Terang, who I saw plenty of in Nashville, and thinking like, oh, he looks like a quad A player. He always looks great in Nashville and can't quite figure it out. And sure enough, he's, being a good second baseman. They acquired Joey Ortiz. Like, he looks good. And he was one of those prospects where if the White Sox got him in a Dylan Cease trade, I've been like, I don't know. Like, if the Orioles can't use him, and like, it kind of looks like a fringy, maybe second division starter. I mean, like, he's now a credible third baseman for a first place team. Like, they're very good at acquiring players, and even whether it's like name brand players or cast-offs, and making them work. Maybe they're not like lighting the league on fire, but even like Jake Bauers is okay. Like, he's holding down position fine for the time being while they figure things out. So I think that's kind of the approach the White Sox need. If they're not going to be somebody breaking the bank for an external free agent, in the case of Milwaukee, they at least paid their own free agents. They extend their own guys like Yelich and Braun, where the White Sox haven't gone that far. But like, you can see the similarities in terms of when they're willing to go on the limb a little bit versus when they bring it back, and just having like a really good front office that allows them to stay competitive, even in down cycles. Like, they might not be a team that's built for October, but at least they're good enough to, hang in a division that's usually like one or two teams. Like, it's not as bad as the AL Central typically is, but the NL Central usually has like Cincinnati, at least historically, has had Cincinnati and Pittsburgh weighing it down to, it's really like, take advantage of a down Cardinals year and you might have something. And the Cardinals have had a few down years that allowed the Brewers to be sneaky good.
The Brewers are frustrating the hell out of the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs always look to St. Louis as being the primary contender in the National League Central because St. Louis will spend some cash when needed. But it's the Brewers that the Cubs just can't figure out as of late. I understand that, like Cleveland sometimes still amazes me. They're still amazing me now on just how well that they are playing. James, how about you? What are your thoughts about the Brewers and coming into the series, covering this series for Sox Machine, going on the road up to Milwaukee? What are some things that you are hoping to learn when covering this series?
I guess like how their offense is working. I mean, yeah, looking at it, and there's obviously guys like playing really well. But there's, yeah, like I think there's a collection of people that I probably would have felt iffy about the White Sox. Like, obviously, I think we'd probably prefer it to the Martin Maldonado approach, but like with Gary Sanchez's defensive reputation and like the way he's hit of the last couple of years, if the White Sox took a chance on that, I'd be like a little bit like, yeah, that feels a little bit like getting a little late on a buy low project after two or three failures. And if Rhys Hoskins, played, he's on the IL right now, but played really well for them for 31 games. And he'd be the typical, like, the White Sox counting on someone to recover back from a major injury the season before and become back to their old self. To be the type of gambles that I would probably be queasy about them taking. But the Brewers are going to have this reputation of pretty good landings and, getting 60 percentile or better outcomes from people. Like, the Sox haven't been able to happen upon like a kind of scrap heap relief project as good as Trevor McGill has been for the Brewers at this point. And I think if you told me that the Brewers are going to be 9 games over or 10 games over in first place, I would have thought it was possible, but I don't think it would have been possible with Jackson Jurio having a sub 600 OPS. So the kind of depth it will create, I don't know if I'll learn about it or just see it out muscle it, but it's a lot of it acquired on a level that didn't seem necessarily, not closed off with like a reinforced steel the way maybe like trading for Juan Soto would have been for them. It's a lot of like, why can't they do that? Or why doesn't it work as well when they do that up and down the Brewers roster, I feel.
Yeah, and the Brewers traded Corbin Burns.
Yeah.
Before the season began. So... Mm-hmm. And there's still 10 games. That's why it's like frustrating from a Cubs point of view. It's like, we didn't think the Brewers were going to be this good. And here we are after the first third of the season. The Cubs are below 500 and the Brewers are 10 games above 500. And they're 5.5 games ahead of the Cubs. Yeah. And now the Cubs with the Pirates of Jared Jones and Paul Skeens, that's not going to be easy moving forward. Maybe the Reds wake up. Like, all of a sudden, there's some heat on the Chicago Cubs, especially after this midweek series against the Brewers. So the Brewers are playing really good baseball. And coming into this weekend, now taking it to a short-term view, yes, the White Sox have Eric Fedde and Garrett Crochet. But, Jim, I feel like runs are going to be a premium for the White Sox this weekend. If the White Sox get swept again in Milwaukee, will we see any changes in either the 26-man roster, in coaches, or management come Monday on the off day?
Well, I'm really intrigued by the possibility of a Tobias Myers revenge game, because do you remember Tobias Myers being on the Charlotte Knights?
I do not.
End of 2022, August and September. He started, let me see here, going back to 2022. He appeared in 7 games for the Knights, all starts. He went 0-6 with a 15.92 ERA. This is during a 92-loss Knights season. 28 hits in 15 walks in 13 innings. Only 11 strikeouts, a 3.3 whip. And now he's starting for the Brewers. So that's, I think...
What's AJ Alexi up to, by the way?
Yeah, I forgot he was there until I was talking to somebody at the Sounds and just, we got him from you guys. And thinking like, yeah, he was briefly there, but yeah, he was just, the Knights were looking for anybody to fill innings at that point because they were just completely wiped out and Myers is not the answer. So yeah, and 2 years later, he's starting for the Brewers. So if he shoves against the White Sox, I think that'll be a pretty staggering, I think, this would be a good case, I think, for just a few people to remember that he was there just doing and asking about it. Like, hey, Tobias Myers, what was your time like with Charlotte? Like James sneak over to the Brewers post game and talk about his his 50.92 ERA. But yeah, that's I think the game that jumps out to me, because Gasser's good, Peralta's good. Like those are good pitchers, and like if the Brewers keep winning, sure. But Myers being like one of those scrap heap pitchers the White Sox have tried and failed with, all of a sudden, like going to Nashville and like looking at his stats with Nashville, like he actually went down to Double-A through 140 innings, and now he succeeded a little bit in Nashville, and now he's in with Milwaukee, and he's throwing fine. He's throwing like good fill-in spot starter innings, and that's I think really kind of gets to the core of these two teams. The White Sox get the worst possible outcome, and the Brewers get one they can work with.
So, James, if the White Sox get swept by the Brewers, are we expecting any changes come Monday in the off day?
Yes, because Robert would probably come back.
Okay.
So technicality.
That's enough.
I don't know how long they want to ride with Woodford. The extra off day allows them to kind of play with the rotation. The typical thing that they would do with it is probably kick Crochet back, but currently they're online to start him on his normal schedule. But if they wanted to play around or move Fetty up to the second game of the Cubs series, that would provide an option for some juggling as far as relief pieces. That Shane Drohan rehab appearance that could be coming due at some point. I don't know, but it could change their needs, especially with having Soroka and Schuster in the bullpen, where if they want to move around or get away from having 5 starters, or try to like skip their way around through the Clevenger IL placement, that maybe Woodford moves around, but remains to be seen.
Well, one player I will be watching for the Milwaukee Brewers is Willy Adames, because I really like his game, and if he has a big series against the White Sox, I think he's like my top free agent target for the White Sox, because you could always move Colson Montgomery around if there's still some questions about Montgomery's long-term home at shortstop. But that dream's going to be popped like right away for me. I could already see the White Sox biggest free agent signing in 2025 being $15 million, much like an Eric Fetty signing. So there we go. I went from, let's get excited about somebody, and let's get dour real quick. The 2024 Chicago White Sox season, folks. That's what it's all about. One big dumpster fire. Well, again, we'll be in Milwaukee over the weekend, so we can't wait to see everybody, especially on Saturday at either the tailgate or at the game. If you are going to the game, stop by and say hi. We'd love to see you guys. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen to the show on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you do listen over there. Follow us on social media. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan, and you can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. To gain full access of our coverage, the Chicago White Sox, on SoxMachine.com, sign up on our Patreon at patreon.com/SoxMachine, where monthly plans start at just $5, and you get an ad-free version of both the podcast and the website, gain full access to all of the coverage and all the reportings from the clubhouse from James when he is in attendance, like he will be this upcoming weekend on the road, and he'll also be at Wrigley Field coming up next week for when the White Sox travel up north to play against the Chicago Cubs. So again, monthly plans start at $5. We have other different tiers of support with additional benefits if you are interested. Sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
The headlines remind us daily, the world is a dangerous place. The elites in charge say everything's fine, stop noticing. But you know better. And your gut knows that time is short to prepare for a world that is 4 missed meals away from chaos. My Patriot Supply has helped over 3 million families become more self-reliant and is the company Americans trust to prepare. Go to mypatriotsupply.com and secure their best-selling 3-month emergency food kits. Each contain delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, averaging over 2,000 calories per day. Secure at least one food kit for each family member. For a limited time, save $200, plus get free shipping on all their Ready Hour 3-month emergency food kits. You're not ready if it's not Ready Hour Foods. My Patriot Supply also has solar power generators, water filtration units, biomass stoves, heirloom seeds, and critical survival gear. Shop mypatriotsupply.com today. mypatriotsupply.com.